Hello and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Ashley Early.
And I'm Kasey Jones.
And we have a lot to talk about today. Specifically, we get to talk to Miss Kasey about the fact that she just experienced an incredible experience. I should have used a different word there. But Miss Kasey got to go to Bangladesh and actually spend some time working with the Rohingya. Specifically helping them with, kind of businesses and launching and marketing. We're going to hear all about that. But before we jump into that, we want to try something new in the spirit of the new year and getting some good self-care practices. There's a lot of stuff going around right now that we fully believe in the importance of gratitude and taking time to say thank you and acknowledge people who are doing a great job. And obviously we're doing a lot of that with our interviews. But we've decided that we're going to try opening these episodes, we're not interviewing anyone, by saying who we recently are grateful to, grateful for, or who we just really respect. So, Kasey, who are you grateful for right now?
Well, not to get a little too cheesy, but Ashley, I'm grateful for you.
Oh my God.
I mean, this has been like a year, just a little under a year of us starting to talk about this. And it all started because you sent me that text message of like, hey, random idea, want to do a podcast together? And by the way, for those of you that don't know, I was explaining this to my parents over the holidays. We don't live in the same city.
No.
I have seen Ashley in real life one time. And that was almost 2 years ago. And so I am super grateful that a year ago you had the great idea, but also the willingness to send me a text message out of the blue and be like, hey, want to do this? Because it's been a really crazy ride since then. So many amazing things have happened. So many amazing things are about to happen. And you're the one that started it. So thank you.
I'm kind of speechless now.
By the way, that never happened. So that's very exciting.
I'm not kidding. I'm literally, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And now what I originally planned to say makes absolutely no sense. So thanks for trying to make this now feels like a really bad idea because now I don't know what to say. And I'll say this. I'll spin it. I mean, of course, I'm thankful for you, Miss Kasey. I like calling you Miss Kasey. I don't know why the South's rubbing off on me.
Yeah, the South is rubbing off on you. It's real.
It's happening. But I'll say this. I'm grateful for several people who have reached out to me and connected on LinkedIn and say how much they've enjoyed this. There are no words for how much that means when, we're working hard, we're trying, we're figuring it out. We're definitely in the figuring it out phase still. But every time I see a note like that, it's such fuel to the fire that, we might not be hitting huge audiences yet, and that's okay, but it's making an impact, and that's everything. So anyone, and you know who you are, who has sent a note or a LinkedIn comment or anything like that.
Or a review on the podcast.
Oh yeah, all the reviews. Thank you for the reviews. But specifically anyone who's taken the time to write a note.
Yeah.
I think I replied to each of them because there haven't been that many, but it means the world. I hope you know that.
Yeah.
So.
I will double that. That's for sure.
Great. All right. And now we've had our moment of gratitude and you've officially found a way to make me speechless. Thank you. Let's switch gears and let's talk about Bangladesh.
Yes.
Pause for ad. Michael knows what he said. He really appreciates when we say pause for ad. So.
Okay, good.
Great.
Yay.
All right. So Kasey, tell me hang on. Cut that part out. Kasey, why don't we start by you telling us how exactly you got invited to participate in this program in the first place? Okay. So what's the backstory? How did you get to Bangladesh?
So the backstory, and bear with me because it's a little bit circuitous here. So the backstory is 3 years ago when I was going through my divorce. I went to lunch with a friend of mine, and we were, he was just kind of asking me questions about what I wanted for my future and what I was thinking about. And at the time I was like, I really want more adventure in my life. And he goes, would you want to go to Cuba? And I was like, hell yeah. And he was like, well, I can't guarantee that you can go, but I'll introduce you to this guy. And so my friend, he and his company, they were involved with this organization called Fringe Diplomacy. The CEO, his co-founder, and the CEO of this company was a Cuban American. And so some of the leadership of this organization, they would go down on these delegations to Cuba, where they would lead workshops with entrepreneurs and all of these other things. And I had a call with this man, Mickey Bergman, who runs Fringe Diplomacy. He's the vice president and executive director of the Richardson Center for Global Engagement. That's Governor Bill Richardson. A lot of what they do is actually negotiating hostage releases. So they were super involved in getting Otto Warmbier home from North Korea. I'm blanking on his name, but there's an American who was just released from an Iranian prison in December, early December. They were the ones that were pretty much, behind that, negotiating things between the U.S. government and the Iranian government. So they do some really important work. And so I had this call with Mickey, and at the end of the call, he was like, okay, so how can I convince you to come with us to Cuba? And I was like, you can ask me. And so I went, and that time I paid my own way. I could not afford it, but I did it. And it was one of the most incredible experiences. I met amazing people on the trip. People that were super connected, really brilliant, and it really changed my career and my sort of skills and expertise in the work that I do, connecting with all of these people. About a year and a half, almost 2 years after that, I was asked to go to Lebanon and lead a series of workshops for the first ever partnership between the UN and a startup accelerator. And so they'd created this like pilot class of social impact startups in Beirut. And again, completely life-changing experience for me. I went over there just feeling like just awash in imposter syndrome. I was like, what the hell would I possibly have to help, to teach these people? They're working on problems like building an app to make it easier for UN field workers to immunize 150,000 refugee children in a 2-week period.
Good Lord.
Like what,
Yeah.
my work in like enterprise analytics just seemed really irrelevant. And the experience was amazing. And I felt like the workshops that I led and the content that I kind of presented wound up being pretty helpful, or at least they told me it was. And that experience is frankly why I started A Better Jones, because I came home from that, and like literally the day I came home or the day after, the company that I was working for told the staff that they had run out of money and I was almost out of a job. And it was sort of being on a high of feeling like, oh my God, I worked with all of these startups and I felt like I made a difference and it was so incredible. That gave me the confidence and the like drive and the passion to go out on my own. And so now, now Mickey and Fringe Diplomacy don't go to Cuba anymore because things have really changed there. Yeah. And so, but they've been super involved in Myanmar, and because of the Myanmar government's hostility to the Rohingya and everything that is going on there, they now do not go to Myanmar anymore, and they go to Bangladesh. And so this trip it was a much smaller group. There were only 8 of us. but the trip was sort of designed to work with the Bangladesh community, the host community that is like around where this Rohingya refugee camp is, and talk with the NGOs, the social impact entrepreneurs, the professionals, the organizations, the government officials, like you name it, all of the stakeholders involved that are trying to solve this crisis and turn a really horrible situation into something a little more positive. And so we just took a ton of meetings with all of these people, helping brainstorm ideas of how they can kind of ease some of the burden and build some successful businesses in light of all of this.
That's insane. So what was like so you were there for how many days? Like, was it a little over a week?
So travel total was over a week, but it takes 30 hours to get there and 30 hours to get back. It took me 4 flights each direction.
Wow.
Yeah. That's okay. I read 4 novels, so there's that. But and watched a bunch of TV. But so I was in country for, I guess, 6 days.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. 6 days. And the first 2 days I was in Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh. And then we went to Cox's Bazar, and that's the district where the Rohingya refugee camp is. It's a very poor area of Bangladesh. And one of the challenges there is that the host community, they're very poor. And so they see all of these NGOs coming and giving medical treatment and aid and like all of these resources to the Rohingya, but the host community doesn't have access to any of those. And so,
yikes.
Yeah. And so there's starting to be some serious tension there. So we spent 3 days in Cox's Bazar visiting the Rohingya refugee camp, which has total, I think it's about 1.2 million people. It's the largest refugee camp in the world.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, to put that in perspective, I live in Portland, Oregon. Portland proper has about 600,000 people.
Yeah, that's bigger than most major cities in the US.
Exactly. And this is, it's all a refugee camp. And the other thing that's unreal about it and very different from other refugee situations is how fast it all came about. And so September of 2017, they went from, I think, having 60,000 refugees to 1.2 million. And you think about all of the challenges associated with having that volume of influx of people that are without resources, without shelter, without money, any of this, and many of whom were seriously injured. And so one of the people that I was talking to, one of the entrepreneurs that we met with, when this first happened, he worked in the camps building toilets. And then he's an architect, went to an Italian architecture school, really, really smart, interesting guy. And he has designed a new kind of toilet. And so that's his new business. And he's trying to work with the NGOs to kind of test this new model that he's built and start to, distribute that in the camps and then also in the host community. But one of the things he was saying is that when he was there, he'd be walking around and there's, people missing limbs, people with horrible kind of physical conditions, and then also small children wandering around who've clearly lost their parents and they're there alone. And he said he would go back to his hotel room every night and just weep for hours. And so the severity of the crisis and the sort of speed in which it happened, I think is really, really is unusual. But one of the things that is also kind of amazing is you talk to, the camp was a lot less depressing than I expected it to be, and a lot cleaner than I expected it to be. And every NGO worker, most of whom this is like their 10th refugee camp that they've worked in, they all said it's the best run they've ever seen. And so it's tremendous what everyone involved has done, and the level of generosity and hospitality of the Bangladeshi people. It's astounding.
Okay, I've got like 30 things in there I want to unpack.
I know.
We said this would be an easy one to record. Good Lord. Okay, so you spend a couple days in the capital, then you go to the refugee camp.
Yeah.
And you're meeting with, so the plan was for you to meet with Rohingya refugees who were trying to start their own businesses.
So here's the deal. They can't start their own businesses. They are so the Bangladeshi people are very committed to the idea that the Rohingya will be repatriated to Myanmar. It does not look like that is likely, but Bangladesh doesn't want to, they don't want to sort of give the impression in any way, shape, or form that they're sort of accepting that this is how it is.
They don't want to allow any sort of integration because they don't want to set the precedent.
Correct.
Okay.
And just so you know, I learned while I was there that, I don't know if you've been following what's going on in India, but India has also been launching this very concerning anti-Muslim kind of campaign. Modi, the new prime minister of India, and there's I think it's like a 1.5 million Muslim population in northeastern India, that there is some concern that they will be ousted from India and pushed into Bangladesh as well. And keep in mind, Bangladesh is a small country.
Yeah.
Like I should look up, like, compared to what state they would be. My guess is it would be like Ohio. And there are 220 million Bangladeshis. So they're already a very crowded country. And so and they don't, their economy can't easily absorb all of these new people. And so, they're really struggling to figure out how do they deal with the situation without setting this precedent that, like, they're going to accept and, like, integrate everybody. Yeah. So the Rohingya are not technically allowed to make money. They still do, but they're not supposed to. So a lot of the entrepreneurs we were meeting with were actually Bangladeshi entrepreneurs that were working on kind of social impact businesses. So everything from, like, there was one company that was so fascinating. I think it's called Alter Youth. And they are creating this program where, like Save the Children, where you can kind of sponsor a child. You can sponsor a child in Bangladesh, in a rural area in Bangladesh, where you pay so that their parents don't take them out of school.
Yep.
And it's that's one example. There were also a couple of companies that were working on how to address, like, the radicalization of Bangladeshi youth. So keep in mind, a lot of Americans aren't aware there were some severe kind of terrorist attacks, like domestic terrorism, a couple of years ago in Bangladesh. So even, like, if you're in a vehicle, so when I was, like, in the taxi, and actually it wasn't even a taxi, it was like the hotel shuttle from the Dhaka airport to my hotel in Dhaka, all of the hotels are gated. And before they allow a vehicle to drive onto the property, they do the, like, mirrored thing underneath the vehicle to search for bombs. Yeah. So we were meeting with, social impact entrepreneurs. entrepreneurs in the host community. So just like, because the host community obviously can create those businesses and they sort of need some help getting those going or growing them. And then also with like the NGOs and the organizations that are trying to work on the refugee crisis. So it's basically like any stakeholder kind of dealing with this situation on multiple levels, we met with. And we also met with a bunch of government officials as well, and like representatives from the World Bank, from the World Food Program, all kinds.
That's insane. And I just did some quick Google foo just to give you guys an idea. I didn't know this either. So do you talk about how populous Bangladesh is? So Bangladesh by size is actually just somewhere between California and Texas.
Oh, okay.
So it's
so
pretty
it's bigger than, yeah.
But
yeah,
its population is equal to the top 15 most populous US states.
Yeah.
So imagine California, Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, New Jersey, Virginia, and possibly Washington State, all crammed into 80% of California.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It's wild. Like there are just people absolutely everywhere.
I can't even imagine that. Okay, so you're meeting with all these incredible organizations, trying to do incredible things, trying to figure out how to support these displaced persons, but they're not allowed to do this stuff. So, this just sounds impossible.
And that's why the progress they have made is astounding. And the level of hope and optimism when you talk to a lot of these people is just, it will absolutely like knock you over. People are so committed to working on these problems and to solving them in really creative ways and in ways that, serve a public good. It's really incredible. I think so. One of the things that I thought was the most interesting, and I think that here's a lesson that we can all kind of learn from this. So I made the mistake of, so in these groups, we talk a lot leading up to it about the mindset that we're going to bring to it. So the idea is not to go there and be like, hey, let me tell you what to do. Like, no. You're there to learn. And yes, offer help where you can, help to make connections. Mm-hmm. But the real focus is on learning from them, what they're dealing with, what their experiences are, all of these other things. Okay. And so you wind up in these conversations asking a lot of questions. And after the first kind of few rounds of meetings, someone like an NGO will come in and they'll tell you how it is and what the real struggle is. And you start to get sort of frustrated on their behalf because people, I don't know, because there's an obstacle in their pathway or something like that. Then you go and you take a meeting with another stakeholder, and that stakeholder is explaining the situation from their perspective. And all of a sudden you realize that what the previous meeting you had, that's not really the full story. That's their perception of what is happening, but it's a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex than that. And you sort of go around in a circle and you realize that everybody has these sort of preconceived notions of who's doing what and why they're doing it and what's happening. And no one really understands anybody else, and no one is really taking the time to kind of learn what the other perspectives are. And so it is, to me, it was just one of those like really key reminders that we need to check our assumptions at the door, because oftentimes we're forgetting that whoever we think is being annoying or disappointing or frustrating or whatever, they have really valid reasons for why they are doing what they are or why they're not doing what they aren't. And assuming their motivations or their intent there is really, really dangerous and not that helpful.
Yeah. No, and we see this all the time, I think, pulling it back to sales. I mean, we see this a lot where people come in and
Yeah.
there's a sudden reaction to a proposal that you don't expect, or, you know, cold calling, somebody's super rude.
Yes.
The situation is always more nuanced and you never have the full story.
Exactly. And I think, you know, the other thing that I think is really, really valid to sales is, and Mickey talks about this a lot in a really wonderful way about, so he's also a professor at Georgetown, and he teaches, he's like not a remotely interesting or impressive human at all.
No. Sounds super boring.
Yeah, but he teaches a class at Georgetown called EQ in like international negotiation.
Okay.
And his whole argument here is that, you know, we like to think of governments as these like these big organizations, and everything is very official and formal and all this other stuff. But we sort of forget that like it's the people that are making the decisions. And
Yep.
so when you're thinking about how you negotiate with these big organizations, you don't think about the country or the governmental department. You think about the person you're talking to. And it's just like in sales. Way too often, and especially when you're more junior in sales, you love to stress all the benefits. You know, in B2B, you love to stress all the benefits to the business. But guess what? The business doesn't buy your product. A person does.
Yep.
And so getting it down to that more personal and human level, like that's your best bet in making a connection, learning what is really going on, and closing a deal, because it's not a company that's going to sign on the dotted line. It's an individual.
And beyond that, I think you hit the other side of this coin is reinforcing the importance of listening.
Yes.
Asking a ton of questions and being that connection maker.
Yep.
Versus the manipulator.
Yes.
When you can, hey, have you considered this? This reminds me of that. Helping people create context and make better sense of their own reality.
Yeah.
You know, you'll hear people use terms like trusted advisor and whatever else, but that's the difference between closing a deal and not, or at the very least, not wasting time on a deal that will never close in the first place. You know,
exactly.
Like sometimes, like I think, you know, I'm hearing you talk about this, and I even in the past like 5 minutes, I went from this point of, oh my God, those are impossible problems to solve, to sometimes you need to go up against impossible problems.
Well, so this is a very good segue to the other thing that I think was the most sort of impactful lesson for me while I was there. So there's one company there that I am just like a huge, huge fan of. The two founders are really, really impressive guys. They both studied and worked outside of Bangladesh. One guy, and I'm forgetting exactly what he did, but he ran a major division at Verizon in the EU, and he went back to Bangladesh to work on something that would help his country. And they've created an absolutely amazing e-commerce platform.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and they kind of specialize in bringing e-commerce to rural Bangladesh.
Oh.
Now, let me point out some challenges here. First of all,
internet.
Almost no one has internet. Second of all, most people aren't even literate. So even if they had internet, they really couldn't navigate that much. So what they did is they partnered with the government, and the government over the last 6 years, I think one of their big initiatives has been to digitize a lot of government forms and services and stuff like that. But again, internet, literacy, all of these things. So
I'm gonna say I'm embarrassed that I went immediately to internet.
Oh,
it didn't even occur to me that literacy.
Exactly. We all do that.
Check my first world privilege right there. Good Lord.
So what they did is they've basically created, I'm trying to remember exactly what they call them. I think it's like digital community centers. If you look at them, they look like a rural post office, and they've got a couple of computers, and this company, they hire what they refer to as entrepreneurs to run each digital community center. So the entrepreneur has to provide a certain level of services, but they can add on any service that they come up with as long as it doesn't compete with the core business services. So you can go in there and you can get a new ID, you can, get paperwork filled out, you can do all kinds of things. And there's someone who will do the paperwork for you. But you can also shop online. So you can go there and be like, I need a new red dress. And you sit there with the guy, the entrepreneur, who will then look up, okay, red dress. And they then partnered with one of the banks, where most of these people also don't have credit cards, they don't have banks, none of that. So you can pay cash and they will open a bank account for you. So now you have a bank account. So the other thing then is, okay, there's no addresses in Bangladesh. I was
going to say
Shipping. So they had to figure out, okay, for shipping, they have to figure out sort of like timeline and logistics and all of this. They were their own Google Maps. They hired a team of people. They bought a bunch of cheap GPSs and they rented a bunch of motorbikes and they mapped their entire country. And they did it in like under a month. And yeah.
And I'm just imagining what you could do with that data.
Right?
Like sell that to the government, sell that to the NGOs, sell that, give it to the NGOs, sell it to the government, or give it to the government, sell it to Verizon. So they can do whatever.
So now, but now there's all kinds of other things where, and first of all, they've custom coded everything, right? They can't use like US or European tools on their internet. So, but they also figured out like in these rural communities, there's a lot of different dialects. So they built a chatbot that works in the dialects so that now when you go in and you want to do some e-commerce or whatever, you can go to the entrepreneur and be like, I need a red dress and here's my budget. And they can type in the chat window, looking for a red dress, here's my budget, here's my size, and it uses AI to spit out all of these recommendations.
I love it. It's like there's an ad running right now that is some woman, it's a girl watching her mother work, and her mother's talking to a computer, and the computer's talking back. And the dad comes in the room and says, hey, isn't that cool? Your mom's working with some people in Japan and they're speaking in Japanese and it's translated into English. And then she goes out and talks to some reindeer, which I hate. I actually hate the ad. But it's interesting to see what is coming with that. And again, putting it in perspective, like I said, checking my first world privilege, I was like, oh God, literacy, that's one thing. But then something we take for granted a lot in the United States. I mean, yes, we have dialects, we have accents.
Yeah.
But if you look at the number of languages spoken, that region of the world, India specifically, I'm sure Bangladesh is right up there on the list. Like the literal language being spoken can change every 5 miles.
Absolutely. And so how do you create like a sort of a digital platform that can address that? And like they've done it and they're doing it. And then, but wait, there's more. So they also now, let's say you are a seamstress and you make dresses and stuff like that. Well, now you can go to them and they will also, they have a whole white box to take pictures of your product. They have cameras, the whole nine, and they will create an online store for you. And their whole online platform, they've aggregated all of these different online platforms. So there are people in rural Bangladesh that are selling their goods on Etsy.
Okay, so we're going to get some links and we're going to put this in our show notes because I'm going to go shopping.
I mean, it's incredible. And they're also working on one where they are working with the Rohingya, where the Rohingya do some of the prep to create clothing and kind of artisan goods and things like that. And because they can't pay the Rohingya money, what they do is they pay them in credit, in store credit. And so they can still buy goods by doing this work. And so they're actually building this whole separate brand that is all goods that are made by both the host community and the refugees. And so they've found all of these ways to completely transform their country. And cultivate a spirit of entrepreneurship and help the refugees and all of these other things. And you know, the lesson here is like, there are no blockers. You can figure it out.
That's insane. I mean, just the power of connection, and just by listening and having conversations.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, why don't we do this more often? Why don't we just connect with each other, and rather than trying to angle the conversation around what's going to have the highest conversion rate, which we need to have an eye on. I'm not denying that, but just what happened to human connection? What happened to reaching out to someone and saying, tell me, what are your blockers right now? Not to try and solve them, not to fix everything, because some things are not fixable, but just to connect.
Yeah.
And
because
who knows what comes from it, if anything.
Well,
I mean, I just think the power of being seen too.
Without a doubt. And the power of being seen and seeing others in a new way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, I agree with you. I think we can all stand to just be more curious about one another.
Yeah.
People do amazing things, and it would have been really easy to be like, oh, you know, I don't know, go in with a condescending view or a, you know, an assumption that like we were going to be there to teach them everything. And I mean, I learned so much, and like, it's astounding what these entrepreneurs and these companies are doing. And in light of, and in the face of incredible challenges. And so it's also this really great reminder that there's always a workaround. There's always a way that you can solve a problem. You just have to get creative, and you have to believe that there is that pathway.
And that is not an easy thing to do some days.
No. Lots of days it really isn't. And I think it's another reason why I know, for me, I want to create more of these opportunities and see how I can, because I learned so much, and it makes me feel such a deep sense of gratitude for what I do have, and so filled with hope and optimism for all that is good in this world. I think in today's political climate, with all of the news that goes on, it is really easy to take a really negative view of our world and of people. But when it comes right down to it, there's also a lot of incredible things that are happening, really, really good things, and people that are going way out of their way to do what is right and good and holy in this world. But you have to be willing to kind of take the time and, I don't know, and apply the intention to actually see that stuff.
Yeah. Now I feel like I need to like slowly hear a Christmas Carol building in the background or something. It's so cheesy, but it's cheesy, but it's true. You really have to, you know, ironically, tying it back to the beginning of this episode, you got to look for the good, because it's so easy. It's the same reason it's easy to sell with fear.
Yep.
It's easy to sell with fear. It's hard to sell with hope. It's hard to sell with positivity.
Yeah.
Because when you act from a place of fear, you act more quickly. You know, the old sales adage, the hardest thing to sell against is the status quo. You know, something new can be risky, something new can be scary, but it can also be good. And you have to look for the good out there and help others to see it too.
And I think it's also, sales can be just such an incredibly brutal job.
Yeah.
And when you feel a connection to something that is good, that maybe, I don't know, that is like you are making a difference, And maybe it has nothing to do with your job. Maybe it has, maybe it's outside of that, but it helps you get through those sort of brutal times in sales, those lulls, those slow periods,
The bad days.
Those really difficult calls, those lost deals.
Which happen to everyone, despite the fact that no one talks about it.
Absolutely. And so I do think, like, I don't know, one of my biggest priorities for 2020, particularly in light of this, is, so I've been thinking about sort of themes for 2020, and one of mine is give first. So can I focus on what I can give to others or what I can give to my community, and have that be what I lead with, instead of what am I going to get? Because I've also learned that, like, when I do have that attitude, I'm a way happier person, and I tend to get better things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people want to give more to somebody who is giving with their own time and with their expertise, versus someone who you feel like you have to earn it or you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's always easier to have a conversation with someone and ask for advice when they're willing to receive it as well as give it, versus someone who's just so focused on my time is money. And
absolutely,
it comes down to people.
Yes.
People buy. And people thrive despite unimaginable difficulties.
And that's the biggest thing. Like, the hope and the optimism and the passion of the Rohingya was just so, I don't know, it was awe-inspiring. And, we sat in this little makeshift shelter on a cement floor with, like, tarp and bamboo walls with, I don't know, maybe 15 of these refugees. And there was one guy in particular who we were asking them sort of, what do they want? What help could we offer? And first of all, most of them spoke English, and they were all so well-spoken and so inspiring. But this one guy, Mohammed, he said, he just gave this, like, impromptu speech about how they just want their humanity to be recognized. And he was like, we're not just refugees. We're artists, we're dancers, we're painters, we're musicians, like, we're storytellers. We just want an ability to be our entire and whole selves. And, yes, there were others in the group that were talking about very practical things. Like, the women were like, we need separate bathrooms, and there were lots of practical stuff, but there was also stuff about just wanting the space to really be themselves.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just such a good reminder that, like, we are all artists and dancers and singers and storytellers. We all have that in us, and it can be so easy to get so heads down and the grind. And we're doing ourselves a disservice, but we're also just doing the world a disservice by not giving ourselves the time to experience and cultivate and honor, like, the full spectrum of what it means to be a human.
And I think it's not just that. It's not just doing it yourself. It's inspiring it in others.
Absolutely.
Creating space for others to do it. So
Yes.
Helping your prospects do that. Helping your peers, your fellow salespeople do that.
Yes.
Helping them lean into the things that make, okay, there it is. We need to make sales human again. We need to bring out the humanity in salespeople. We're not automatons. We're not, we're not manipulators out to go for blood. We're not a bunch of, we're not a monicosm. We're not a bunch of bros. We're not a bunch of musicians. We're everything and nothing.
Yep.
And our job is simply to create connections. That's what we're good at. That's what the best salespeople do day in and day out. We are connectors of humanity. And in the process, we make bank. usually.
Hells yeah.
At least we like to pretend we do. This is a heavy one.
I mean, it's a rich one.
Yeah.
There's a lot. And I got to be honest, while a trip a week before or 2 weeks before Christmas was like not the best timing, it was really tough. Mentally and personally, could not have come at a better time, because when you think about sort of wrapping up this year, this decade, and looking toward the future, it really helped reset a lot of priorities for me around the kind of life I want to live, the kind of person I want to be, and the kind of impact or influence I want to have.
So let's do our own kind of year-end wrap-up here.
Yeah.
Decade end. I'm curious. And you ask these right back at me.
Okay.
How are you different now than you were 10 years ago?
Oh, God. I know myself a lot better. I know my own strength a lot better. I'm a lot more authentic, a lot more unabashedly me. I'm also a lot kinder. I used to be a lot more insecure, and so it led me to be, I don't know, kind of contract as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this. As a result, I don't know, I gave off the impression that I was cold and aloof when I was really shy and awkward. But I worked really hard to not do that. And as a result, I have more close female friends now as I push 40 than I did in high school or college. And that's pretty amazing. How about you?
I think I am more scared, ironically enough. I feel like I feel like my eyes have been open. I'm much less naive. Yeah. I am definitely in the thick of not a midlife crisis by any means, but I feel like I kind of understand now how the world works, and it's not what I thought it was, and that's okay. But it's made me very protective of me and mine.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. But I'm finding it easier to be more self-critical. I'm finding it easier to catch myself when I'm going into imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm finding it easier to stand up for myself in a way I didn't when I was 10 years younger.
Oh, yeah.
10 years younger me was very much a crowd pleaser. I'm not doing that anymore. I've seen the result of what that creates. I think with that, those fears, those nerves, there is also a lot of that. I know myself. I know what I can do and I know what I can't do.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly working on the stuff I think I can't do to get better at it or to compensate for it. But at the same time, I find a lot more joy in the things that I do well. I'm a lot better at taking compliments than I used to be, which is really interesting. I never really thought I was bad at taking compliments. I was really good at taking criticism. I was really bad at taking compliments.
Yeah.
Probably still am, but way better than I used to be. At least now I hear them. I didn't used to.
Yep. I know that feeling.
Which it's remarkable how many people go through that. Like you literally have to be smacked upside the head to hear a compliment.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's crazy. And I think I am far more, as much as I say I'm scared and I'm fearful, I'm also much more trusting in the universe.
Yes.
Which is a very strange contradiction. I trust the universe, but I have a harder time trusting people. So I trust like the right things will generally happen.
Yeah.
But I've learned to protect myself from the people who might stand in the way.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. And it's interesting to look back at the past 10 years. I'm not going to go into where I was because 10 years ago, I was just starting my sales career. In fact, I don't even think I really had started my sales career yet. No, I hadn't. I absolutely hadn't. I was just graduating college. So I'm aging myself a bit. I had no idea I'd be here. And to that end, the next question I have, this is probably where we close. Where do you think, or what do you want your life to be in 10 years?
So it's interesting.
Because everyone's doing this stuff now.
Yeah.
What's the vision?
And I don't know about 10 years, but it's interesting. I've meant to do this for years. There was a Tim Ferriss interview that I listened to like 3 years ago. Don't remember. Some woman, I think she was a designer and now is a professor or something. And she was talking about how something she does with her students is she has them basically write a short story that is a day in a life of them in the future in 7 years. And she prompts them of getting really specific. So it's not like, oh, what do I want to accomplish? It's like, I wake up. What time do you wake up? What kind of bed are you in? Where are you sleeping? What sheets are on your bed? Like get
full creative writing.
Like get really specific. And then tell the story of that day. And she said that, you know, she's been teaching for like 15 years or something. And she said that every year, she has tons of her old students write her and say, oh my God, I did everything from my 7-year short story in 5. And so it's interesting. My boyfriend and I, we made a deal that this week we are both going to write our 7-year short story this week. You know, I think for me, I don't know yet all of the things that go into that, but I do know that there's 2 big things for me, I think. One is I want to feel like I have an impact. I want to make more of an impact. And I think there's going to be a bunch of different ways that takes shape. But I'm really focused over this next year of figuring out how I can start to get some of those things going. And other side of sales is obviously plays a huge part in that. But then I also, the ability to travel in this capacity as part of work has been life-changing on so many different levels and in so many different ways. We would need like a 3-hour podcast for me to go into all of them. But so I want to find more opportunity to cultivate more of those experiences, both because, you know, getting out of the office, getting out of our day-to-day, experiencing a completely different culture has such an impact, but also, you know, the Americans that I traveled with, these are just incredible people that do totally different things. I mean, there's one guy who he makes compostable packaging. Another runs an urban farm in Chicago. One woman is creating a hemp, like textiles and fashion line. There's a woman who she and her husband are like co-owners of 2 of my absolute favorite restaurants in Portland, and I had to really struggle not to fangirl over her. She used to be the pastry chef at one of them, and now she runs a mass atrocity and genocide awareness and prevention nonprofit.
Holy cow.
People are fascinating. And I love the ability to kind of get out of my day-to-day and connect with people that are doing things that are so different from me, because I learned so much. And so I want more of that in my life. How about you? What's your 10-year plan?
You know, I ask these questions and I don't have answers. I probably should have planned this beforehand. I want to use humor to deflect less. I want to be more present. I would like to have self-care down to a science. You know, people talk about growth hacking. I need to go through self-care hacking. And I'm really looking, and
biohacking.
Biohacking, yep.
It's all part of it.
Doing all that reading. But more than anything, my 20s, the past decade, I've really been about getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be a part of my life. But 10 years from now, I want to look back and know that I know how to be comfortable.
Yeah.
In my life, whatever it looks like. Because I want to make sure I don't fall victim to getting so comfortable with being uncomfortable that I don't know how to turn it off.
Yeah.
Which I can completely see my personality doing.
Yes.
So that's my big thing. It's not stability, because that's an illusion. But I want to be able to be comfortable in what my life is.
I think
and for my husband to have the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is arguably going to be much trickier.
Yeah.
Because he's a separate person.
Well,
and can't control other people.
No. And I do think I look back on one of the biggest challenges in my marriage was exactly that there was this like constant need to like check off the next box or do the next thing. And there wasn't enough gratitude or appreciation for the present. And as a result, we were chasing something that didn't exist, and we really lost what we had.
Yeah. So here's to 2019 being over.
Yes.
And all it has given us.
Yes.
We are thankful for it. And good riddance, bring on 2020.
Hells yes.
All right. Happy New Year, Kasey.
Happy New Year.